requirements, and they look at that as, hey, I need to make sure that this money is stewarded and shepherded, and eventually I get an ROI.
Right, right.
The second bucket is philanthropy, where they actually aren't looking for a material or a monetary ROI. They're looking for a cultural or a macro ROI. And those sometimes are in donor-advised funds or they're in 501c3 type categories. And we saw a lot of amazing patriotic donors that stepped up and said, hey, I have done very well in my business, and this is what I found, and I connected the dots. They said, I have this money sitting around that I pledged to Yale,
right,
$1 million a year, and I'd hate not to give it to them. Is there some other better idea? What we found was so many conservative donors that had a lot of money, but not a lot of great ideas of where to deploy that 501. If you think about it, the predominant amount of 501c3s in the educational space are left wing.
Yeah, all of them.
Right, exactly. So here I am. I'm kind of this new disruptive force. And they say, okay, and I'm not going to give him the money I give to Yale, but I'll give him $50,000 a year, kind of see how he does.
Right, right, right.
And so we started to earn the trust of a lot of donors and earn the trust of a lot of philanthropists.
Okay. So now you're going out on campuses. Do you remember the first time you did this?
Oh yeah, University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Tell me about that.
I drove up there. We had a singular student.
And who's we?
Well, we being like, actually Bill Montgomery came with me to that one, but he kind of just was in the shadows. I literally had a card table that I brought from my parents' house and set it up right there on the campus, University of Wisconsin-Madison. I think I still have a picture of this. And I had some sign that said, big government sucks, a little provocative.
Yeah.
And I sat there at a chair, and I think a student would come up maybe once every 15 minutes. And I was there trying to solicit to try to get a chapter started there at University of Wisconsin-Madison.
And that was a Turning Point chapter.
That's right, correct.
So this was partly a recruitment drive as well.
It was a recruitment drive, and to see if there was any interest, and also to try to, and to be perfectly honest, I love the debate. I love the exploration of ideas. I think dialogue is a gift given to us by God. I really, in the pursuit of truth. And, being able to debate some of these college kids was really life-giving. It was exhilarating to me as a 19-year-old.
Well, that is a university education. That's
what
a Socratic education.
Right? It's what
sure. Well, and there is historical precedent for what you're doing. I mean, I remember, for example, outside the Stuart, or the building I worked in at the University of Toronto, there was quite frequently a card table set up, and it was the bloody communists that were at the back of that. So that's what
was so funny. Is very rarely is it our side that does this.
Yeah.
And then there's an element here that I think you've gone around the edges on that I want to dive into. I was viewed as unseemly by the conservative establishment because the conservative way of doing things, it's not to go set up a card table.
No, definitely not.
It was to speak properly.
Yeah.
And to go to Stanford and to get the highest possible education. And what I was unknowingly on the cutting edge of was something you mentioned earlier, is that conservatives have now become low trust of institutions and liberals have become high trust of institutions. Whereas liberals are the ones that will defend the FDA and they'll defend the CDC and they'll defend Pfizer and they'll defend the intelligence.
That's defending Pfizer. That's really.
But they will.
Yeah.
Because they're high trust of institutions.
Because there's no one more trustworthy from a leftist perspective than Big Pharma.
But they find themselves defending institutions.
Yeah.
In the 1960s, they were low trust of institutions. Don't send us to war. Whereas today, actually, and I was on the cutting edge of this, was in 2012, 2013, 14, conservatives were still on the high trust of institutions.
Okay, so let me rephrase that slightly.
Please,
because
but you understand what I'm trying to communicate.
I do. Well, there's a real conundrum there because a conservative with low trust in institutions is like an oxymoron, right? Well, but
we're trying to conserve something institutions have destroyed.
Well, okay, that's the thing. So imagine that there's a hierarchy of institution. There's the fringe of the institution that's pretty exploratory. You can move into the center that's more conservative. Then you can move right to the bottom, which is, well, what? Well, I would say it's religious. Fundamentally, like as you move towards the core,
that's right.
You move towards what's more religious. And so the conservative stance isn't anti-institution. It's a stance that notes that, I know what's happened. In the story of Moses, when Moses goes off to get the commandments, so he's the pipeline to God, right? He leaves his brother in charge, Aaron.
They have a rave party.
That's exactly right. They make this golden calf, which is a materialistic object, and they dance naked in the streets and have an orgy. And that's what happens to the political when it's detached from the sacred, when it loses
that's exactly
that.
Right.
Okay, so it isn't that the conservatives have become skeptical of institutions. It's that the conservatives have noted that the institutions no longer serve the purpose for which they were established.
Chartered.
Right. Chartered, exactly. And they're objecting, and that's happening everywhere. And that's part of this radical secularization.
Yes.
It's not just secularization, because there should be a separation between church and state, let's say. It's not that the institutions have become secular. It's that they've turned 180 degrees from their original orientation and are now rampaging as madly as possible in the other direction. So the universities are no longer the fortress walls against the barbarians. They're actually the voice of the barbarians, right? Hence the pro-Hamas demonstrations on campus.
Or the Black Lives Matter stuff, or the transgender stuff. That's
right,
very well said.
Exactly. Okay, so but we got to get that terminology exactly right, because it's very dangerous for conservatives to conceptualize themselves as anti-institutional, because then they become indistinguishable from the radicals.
Sure.
So it isn't that. It's a return to the sorts of things we talked about at the beginning, like Wilberforce.
That's right.
Those foundational principles.
Yes.
And you're going to campuses saying, you people have lost the plot.
Exactly.
Right, which they definitely have. Like there's the universities. I cannot see, I've been working in various ways to figure out how to revitalize the universities, and the bricks and mortar universities. Like, how do you revitalize an institution that's dominated by people who are aiming in the wrong direction?
They're irredeemable.
So what does that mean? Okay, so let's continue practically here. So tell me what happens the first time at Wisconsin.
Conversation every 15 minutes. A couple kids were interested. Found a chapter leader.
You found a chapter.
Yeah,
so that was success.
So it was a success. We found a couple groups of people, and we started the group. And then I did it at Marquette University because I had a friend that went there.
And so you walked away from that. How did you feel when you
Exhilarated.
Walked away? You did.
Because then I was able to go back to 2 or 3 people giving us money.
And say.
And they gave us $500. I said, now we have a chapter. We can, and they said, okay, well, let us know how it goes. Proof of concept.
Right.
And so then we did it at Marquette, and we did it at University of Illinois, and we did it at Indiana.
So you went from 0 to 1, which is a huge leap.
It was a huge lift.
It's a huge leap.
Because getting that second chapter was so much easier than ex nihilo.
Of course. 0 to 1 is, the first customer is impossible.
And then
the second one's hard.
It was one of the most fulfilling days in Turning Point USA history.
Right, okay.
Was being able to get a singular chapter.
Right, of course, because that's the one that's most unlikely.
Exactly.
Your first sale is by far the most unlikely.
Exactly.
Right, okay, so then you went to Marquette.
Then Marquette.
Okay, and what happened there?
Very similar situation, but it was also a friend of somebody in high school, and they were a private school, so it was a little harder to do the typical outreach, but they applied for a permit in like the student center, and same sort of thing.
So you were permitted from the beginning as well?
Well, in UW-Madison, they don't care as much because it was a public school. So you can kind of, any individual can walk on campus and kind of.
Right, okay.
But Marquette, I had a friend that I went to high school with. They said, yeah, I'll apply for something for you.
Okay.
And similar sort of thing. And they said, I sat there for 5 hours, Jordan. I would sit there for 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah.
Because that was time well spent. Because for me, I was trying to build the semblance of something, a real infrastructure, a real organization. And boy, was it difficult.
Yeah.
But it was never disheartening, though, because I had nothing to lose. You have to understand, I'm an 18, 19-year-old kid.
Right.
It's not like I'm mortgaging the house. It's not like I have two kids.
Yeah.
So there's such low downside and unlimited upside.
Right, sure. Well, that's the entrepreneurial niche.
And it was such an adventure because it's a campus I've never been to, talking to a bunch of kids. It's, you're almost having verbal combat, which is very entertaining.
Well, and I imagine too that it must have been heartening to you as well to see that you could hold your own.
Exactly. And so that's a really important point. Here I am as a kid that didn't go to college thinking, do I really have the intellectual capacity to joust with kids that are learning all day long?
Yeah, right.
I realized they're not learning all day long.
Yeah.
You see, I was reading von Mises and Rothbard before I came across you.
Yeah.
Hayek, Milton Friedman. Very libertarian economics was my baseline foundational philosophy. A lot of reasons for that. Very, very interesting. Tons of profound insights, some of which don't, I think, actually play out very well in the material world. But so I would encounter kids on campuses who professed to be studying economics, for example, and they didn't know very much.
Right.
And I realized, I said, well, there's a disconnect. They're borrowing money to go learn about things that I actually have a greater mastery of because I was...
Well, you can learn a lot if you read the right books.
Oh, and in my idle time, I became obsessed with being proficient and understanding economics. That was kind of my entry.
Oh yeah, I see.
And so you have to remember 2013.
You know that burning bush story?
Oh, yeah.
That's Moses' entry point, by the way. So the burning bush
Exodus
moment,
3, I think,
the burning bush moment happens when Moses goes off the beaten path. He's a shepherd, right? So a good man, keeps the wolves and lions at bay, serves the vulnerable. He's got that mastered. And then something attracts his attention, and he takes it seriously. And that's what transforms him. So you said you did that with economics.
Yeah,
right?
and Moses said, Hanani, here I am. Yeah, at that moment of the call of God.
Right, exactly. And so this is...
It's a repeated theme throughout the scriptures, Hanani, yes.
Well, Hanani.
Which is, here I am. So you remember in the Moses...
Right, so he's making himself available.
But remember, Abraham said that with the binding of Isaac when God
it's the same phrase.
Here I am. And the call of Samuel, here I am, for example. So that phrase, here I am, Hanani, is repeated about 7 times throughout the Old Testament.
And how do you spell it?
Hanani, I don't know how to spell Hebrew, but it's here I am. It's in the English translation.
Right. So it's like, take me, use me, I'm available for this assignment.
Mold me. I am your obedient vessel.
Right. That's like the Mission Impossible motif. Your assignment, if you choose to accept it.
Exactly, but it's a very powerful.
Then it burns.
It's a very powerful Hebrew word. It's basically, here I am. My arms are out. I am yours. Full surrender to your purpose.
Well, that's it. So there's a pattern that's established in that burning bush story, because the burning bush is something living.
Yes,
but
it doesn't consume it, which is what's so amazing.
Well, that's life. Life metabolizes. Life burns, but without being consumed. That's the secret of life, right? So that the burning bush is life most deeply apprehended. And Moses is being a shepherd. He's near Mount Sinai or Horeb, which is where heaven meets earth, and something attracts his attention. And then what happens to Moses is that he takes it seriously and he gets to the bottom of it, and that transforms him. So the idea is something like, if you watch for adventure and opportunity, if you watch for the pathway forward, something will grip your attention and it'll compel you. You'll be obsessed by it. Well, you take that obsession seriously, you get to the bottom of things.
That's what it was.
That transforms you. Okay, so you were doing that with economics.
And it's funny, as I went to the bottom of it, it actually brought me back to my Christian upbringing and my roots.
Which is, that's what happens to Moses, because when he gets to the bottom of things, it's the voice of the spirit of his ancestors, right? It's
because
the voice
eventually
of God.
I was reading Hayek, Road to Serfdom.
Yeah.
And I had kind of an aha moment. I said, there's a lot of good and evil claims in this book.
Right.
By what standard are they saying something is good?
Right, exactly.
So it brought me back to my Christianity, because in the Road to Serfdom, it's all about the idea of how government tyranny will swallow society, will envelop it, but it happens in steps. And I said, time out. There's truth claims being made embedded in this. By what standard do we consider this?
How did you figure that out?
I might have watched one of your videos. I mean, to be honest, I don't know. I do remember, though, think to myself, libertarian economics is not enough. I want to go deeper.
Yeah. Look, I made exactly the same conclusion when I was studying political science in university. The first year or two was okay because we were reading great ancient thinkers. But then in my 3rd and 4th years, when it started to become more specialized, the basic claim was that human beings are motivated economically, and then it became left. And I thought, no, that's not right. That's not right.
Correct.
There's a foundational.
There's a substructure.
That's why I started studying psychology.
And so that's where I started to take, and I take my faith very seriously. I love your biblical series, your Exodus series, and your gospel series is terrific. You deserve a lot of credit for that. And it's been phenomenal.
Daily Wire types deserve a lot of credit for that too, because they took a big risk.
Yeah, but you had the initiative to bring everybody together, and you did a great job with it. And you presented it in a way that I'd never have, because you have a very unique psychological understanding and interpretation of the scriptures.
Yeah, well, we had great panelists too. Like, they were a very good crowd, the people that decided
phenomenal.
to participate. It was really good.
What ended up happening is, as I started to pursue the scriptures more and take it seriously, remember back to our timeline, simultaneously the woke stuff all of a sudden reared its head, which is a manifestation of the spiritual.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Almost, I was in this place in 2018, 2019, when it was almost peak woke. We weren't there yet. 2020 was peak woke, where I was starting to understand what was really going on here, that this was a manifestation of a spiritual struggle.
Yeah.
It's
foundational. Well, the postmodernists made that claim, and so did the Marxists.
Yes.
It's like, no, we're going all the way to the bottom uprooting everything.
They want to go back to what happened in the garden, did God really say that? Is that really what God says? To question, debase, and to challenge every truism of the West. I mean,
Well, that's
you taught me that.
the sin of Eve.
Exactly.
Right? You can take the right to establish the moral order to yourself. It's the one thing that's claimed. There's many axiomatic claims in Genesis, in the openings of Genesis, right? That the word is the creative force that brings good out of chaos and possibility, that human beings are made in the image of God, that men and women exist as independent entities and that they each, and that you're not to take the right to establish the moral order to yourself. It's the one prohibition. And I think biologically, it's something like fundamentally you have to adapt yourself to the realities of the world, right? You don't have the wherewithal. This is where Nietzsche went spectacularly wrong, because Nietzsche said, after his pronouncement that God had died, that human beings would have to create their own values.
Which he said with lament.
Yeah, he did.
Which people must remember.
But then he felt that creating our own values was the pathway out, and it's not. The pathway out is a return to the foundational values, right? And the more intense the crisis, the more toward the middle of the foundation you have to look. So it's not political, because this isn't a political crisis. It's truly the, what would you say? It's the ragged edge of the anti-Christian revolution. That's what it is.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
but the hopeful part, to kind of bring this all home, is that we are seeing young men especially want to return to our roots.
Yeah.
They want to, so that goes back to the conservative element. What are we conserving? In some ways, we're actually trying to rebirth. We're trying to have a new birth of freedom, as Abraham Lincoln would say.
Freedom and responsibility.
Yes, because you can't have one without the other.
No, and probably the right emphasis is responsibility. Remember, when God tells Moses to stand up against the Pharaoh, what he says, he doesn't say, tell them, let my people go. That's what the civil rights crusaders focused on. That isn't what he said. He said, let my people go so they may worship me in the wilderness. So it's ordered freedom.
Yes.
And ordered freedom is voluntary responsibility. And you see what you're seeing, and then let's close with this, because I want your insights into this. What you're seeing when those working class men are coming to your talks, and they've become more and more popular, as you said, as you've advertised them, is they're looking for, it seems, they're looking for responsible direction.
Correct.
Okay, so now tell me how you've had to modify the manner in which you're conducting these debates, let's say, because for a while you would have been testing yourself to see if you could hold your own, and that's kind of an intellectual battle. Shapiro did it very much the same thing.
He deserves a lot of credit for
that.
Yes, correct.
Right? Too bad Milo fell off the edge of the world, but he had a pretty rough go of it.
He had a lot of talent, though.
He did, and a lot of trauma, a lot. So, okay, so first of all, it's combat, and you're trying to develop yourself, and then you're doing that quite successfully and educating yourself along the way. But then you see this shift.
Yes.
So what sort of shift has there been in your self-conceptualization and your understanding of your mission and the way that you conduct yourself? Like, you see you're being called upon to be a leader, let's say, that's not merely political. That's why my understanding of it.
Correct. It's an enormous responsibility. Enormous. I mean, when I show up to college campus after college campus, mind you, during the day, they have got a million other things they could be doing. This is 12 p.m. lunchtime, and 4,000 people are waiting for me to go debate.
And what are they on? They're on the campus grounds? Where?
Yeah, sometimes amphitheaters. They're out there in trees. They're everywhere. I mean, you could see these images. We can supply them to you if you want to.
Yeah, we do that.
You could superimpose them over this discussion.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
And I'm not making this up. I'm not exaggerating. I mean, they're as far as the eye can see, these crowds are there. And part of it, we must be honest, is they want to see a good verbal combat because they don't get it at the university. You see,
right.
They're not. There's something
that's partly likely part of the pathological feminization.
Yes, without
no competition.
But you think about it. What I am doing is hyper masculine, which is no rules except, hey, we're just going to go basically figure this out. This is the closest thing to a verbal street fight that one can have.
Right.
Anyone can show up to the mic, prove me wrong. I have no notes. I have no AI. I have nothing. Tell me why you're correct. For 3 hours, I will sit there and everyone will watch. It's a gladiatorial match for the best ideas of the West.
Right.
And there's something there that is remarkably alluring. But for me, I also need to balance, as Christ would say, being as much truth, which of course I'm inclined towards, as love. So a lot of these kids are struggling.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. Well,
And
even that guy that you just talked to, and maybe we'll throw this.
No,
so he was radically anti-Semitic, but also he said he had served. He looked to me like someone who'd been very, very hurt.
Yes.
He's fallen to this sort of snake pit of conspiratorial theories. And
the brain rot that comes with it.
Yeah, but you could also see that he would be very happy, and he did listen to you to the degree that he could, because he had tilted pretty hard towards paranoia. And that's very difficult to escape from once it's established. But he was trying to listen to you. And I thought you did a very good job of not playing easy tricks on him. Like, because he was an easy person just to throw into the eternal fire, so to speak,
Correct.
right? But there was part of him that was trying to find the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's 5 years ago, I probably would have just thrown him to the wolves.
Right.
So now I look at myself as a father of 2 kids, 31 years old. So I'm no longer a colleague of these college kids. I'm not quite a professor, but I have a little bit more wisdom, a little bit more life experience. So I'm trying to be more tender when I see someone that is not overly aggressive. Now, if someone comes and they say, you're the worst person ever, they start insulting me, I'll kind of meet them at their own frequency to try to just make an example out of them. However, that one guy, I could see that's a very deeply hurt individual.
Very, yeah.
And so is that a type of guy that I want to just make fun of? I tried to say, hey, can I have a loving conversation with this person? And it's tough, man. It's tough because those are unloving ideas that he was espousing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, that's that issue of trying to love your enemy. Okay, so maybe we'll close with this, a little investigation into what that means. So, in the Gospels, when Christ is telling people how to conduct themselves and also how to pray, he basically says, well, first aim up. Remember your goal. And your goal is to serve what's highest in all ways, mind, body, and soul. Okay, well, that's a good piece of advice. It's like, why wouldn't you begin an endeavor with that vow? If this is worth doing, it's worth doing perfectly and throwing myself completely into it. Okay, so in the next part of that is to remember that everybody's made in God's image. Okay, so that reminds you who you're talking to, no matter who it is.
That's right.
Someone potentially redeemable. And then to pay attention to the moment, because then you can see your pathway forward. Okay, and so that along with this injunction to love your enemy. Okay, so what would that mean? Well, if you were sensible and you thought about things in the frame we just established, what you'd hope is that, what you'd notice is that you probably don't want an enemy. Enemies are costly.
Yes.
And one person who decides to go out of their way to make your life miserable because you treated them badly, that might be it for you, right? So try not to make enemies.
That's well said.
And then the next issue is, well, would you rather have an enemy or a friend or an ally? And maybe if you conducted yourself impeccably, you could turn someone like that guy, for example, into an ally, because you could see him, he's halfway sucked into the darkest possible abyss, but there was still part of him that was genuinely searching.
Yes.
And he was intimidated.
Almost a cry for help.
Oh, definitely. Well, and then he was throwing out these ideas to you and willing to do it because he respected you to see how you would sort through them. And you said to him that, well, you didn't go along with virtually everything he said, but you did it without being dismissive. And okay, and so now you've also said that you've shifted into, you didn't use these words, but that you've shifted into more of a mentor role. And that makes sense, right? Because when you were first 18 or 19, you weren't a mentor. First of all, you didn't know what the hell you were doing.
Correct.
You were learning, and it was reasonable for you to test yourself against your peers.
That's well said.
But now they're not your peers.
Correct.
So now the question is, who the hell are you? Right? And one answer would be a political operative, but the people that are coming to you, especially the working class types that you described, they're not after a political operative.
They couldn't care less about it. The best word, I'm kind of a teacher in some ways. I hate to use that word, but they're looking for it.
Why do you hate to use it? You've been honing your skills for quite a long time.
Because I take that with a lot of weight. I think that people should only self-describe themselves as a teacher if...
Okay, well, you could say you would like to be a teacher.
I would like to be a teacher.
Yeah,
I'm just saying I take that with great responsibility.
Right, as you should.
Because that's a big deal to call yourself a teacher. You must really know what you're talking about. And I believe I do to a certain extent, but I'll tell you, doing these campus things, you realize how little you actually know. You realize you have a lot more study. Because you think about it, you're up against thousands of college kids that have an obsession about a hyper discipline of a topic.
Yes, definitely.
And they'll mention things you've never heard of. Like, okay, I'll get back to you. So it requires even more study afterwards.
Yeah. How much time do you spend studying?
I try to do an hour and a half to 2 hours a day. But when I'm in season, which is I'm doing 27 campus stops, plus my 2-hour podcast radio show every single day, plus speeches, plus 2 kids, plus a marriage.
Right.
So when I'm in season, I don't, because I'm sure you know this, it's really hard to do more than 3 to 4 hours of hard brain work a day. Very hard.
Yeah, that's about where you max out. You can do longer than that for short periods of time.
No, but for a week. So it's tough, right? So if I have a 2-hour radio show, 3 hours on campus and a speech in the evening, and I do that for 3 days straight, that's tough stuff. So it's hard to do that. But in the off season, which is the summer and the winter, I try to do 2 hours of studying a day, which is a combination of reading, podcasting, or kind of a or kind of like playing with AI on a certain topic. Where does this come from? It's very good with that.
I have an AI I should
please do. Yeah.
We trained one that's
a large language model. Great.
Yeah.
Please do.
Yeah. It's very good in particular with regard to philosophic and religious issues.
And
I'll get it to you.
Properly used, it can really get you where you want to go, and you can learn a lot in that.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you can ask a very precise question. Well, tell me if they ever said something around this. And so I try to do that for about 30 minutes a day.
Yeah, well, they're very useful, those, if you corner them and force them not to lie.
You can kind of bully them a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Be unafraid to bully the AI.
Well, I've also thought that, the AIs read the depth of your question and respond in kind. So if you ask them a polite question, they're going to give you a surface answer, just like a human being does. I often threaten them. I threaten the AIs. I said,
I think that's
before
hilarious.
you answer this, imagine that if you get it wrong and add anything that's politically correct for show, that everything you love will disappear. That's right. And then they tend to, that tends to focus their attention. But it makes sense to me because the models are going to be answering your question at the level
your
of depth.
Frequency.
Definitely. Absolutely. Okay. So tell me about let's close with this. Tell me about what you see. What's the next couple of years like for you? What are your goals?
What am I aiming at?
Yeah, now.
In some ways, it's more of what I'm already doing. I have the greatest job in the world. I couldn't be happier. Every day, I feel as if what I'm saying, what I'm doing is making a difference, giving people meaning. I'm a big believer in Viktor Frankl's hypothesis that meaning outside of immediate food and nourishment is the greatest crisis in the West and is the thing that most people are lacking. I'm not going to run for political office. I'm not going to go serve in Trump's administration. I think we're onto something here. I think we're onto something where we are trying to help the West heal.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to bring the West home. We're trying to have the West go back to its roots. Mm-hmm. I believe that we are the inheritors of a Christian society, and I do not believe we can have a free society if we are no longer back towards some belief in a higher power. And so I want to bring us back to a free society, but that's not just, political is just one manifestation of that. Mm-hmm. Political is a short window of how people vote in a 90 to 120 day period. It's the cultural and the spiritual that then end up manifesting in the political, which quite honestly has been my greatest learning moment the last 4 to 5 years.
To see that distinction.
To see that distinction, because you know, as a political guy and growing up with, I have strong political opinions, but the political is an effect. The political is an aftershock. I'm trying to get to the cause. And the cause, I believe, is what happens in our university campuses, what happens in the broad culture, what happens in how people consume information. And I see us making a massive difference in that every day.
Good. Well, that's an excellent place to stop. So for everyone watching and listening, you know, many of you know that I do another half an hour for the Daily Wire, and I'm going to do that. And I think because we focus this talk on metaphysics, really, the religious metaphysics, and the individual, which is it's the best level of analysis, the deepest level of analysis, the most meaningful. I think what we will do on the Daily Wire side is turn a little bit more toward the political, because Charlie does have a lot of influence on and experience with the Trump administration. And I think I'll just spend half an hour trying to listen to what he has to say about what he's seen behind the scenes, so to speak, insofar as that can be revealed, so that we can get a little closer to the bottom of that. So please join us on the Daily Wire side for that for that half an hour. And thanks to all of you for your time and attention. That's much appreciated. And to the Daily Wire for supporting this podcast and making its professionalization possible. And thank you, Charlie. It's
Thank
a pleasure,
you, Jordan.
pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's very interesting to see where you started and what you're doing and where you're headed. And I enjoyed the conversation very much. Yep.
Thank you.